Episode 4.
We're back.
We're back. Doesn't seem too long ago with episode 3, but here we are.
Indeed.
A week ago. We did the episode a week ago. All right, so to make a little mnemonic device, our 4th episode will be the 4 agreements.
Okay, I've been hearing this, but I don't know what.
Your brother, Nate, he gave me the book about it.
Oh, yeah?
It's a good self-help book. It's a book that can help people with answers on how to live well. Well, not well, but live spiritually well.
Okay.
And I took a look at it. It's a really easy, fun read. The book is so good. Ruiz is the author. He does a great job explaining his examples. Don Miguel Ruiz does a really good job explaining his examples. He lays out a lot of examples, both historical and personal examples. The introduction to the book provides a story which states the underlying philosophy of the book. Now, it is important to read that story in order to understand the essence of the book. The author, Don Miguel Ruiz, wants you to primarily know that we are all living things living in a dream world. We are awake, but we are dreaming, meaning that what we have perceived to be real is not in fact a reality, but a projection. He says that there's a fog known as mitote to the Toltecs. I think I pronounced it correctly, mitote. And it blocks us from seeing the real world. For years, people have continued their projections onto the next generation. Everything that we understand about the world that we live in the world that we see is a collective of perceptions all over the world of various beliefs and truths.
With the hand-me-down paradigms.
With the hand-me-down paradigms, and also with basically the intent of creating meaning.
The preface, and it said talked about this fog, this lens, this it obscures like what really is. Is that what you're saying? We have to
exactly that.
Decode it.
We had to decode it, that there's this fog that prevents us from seeing the actual world, and that everything that we perceive, everything that we feel and react to, is what we see in that fog, which is not the real world.
It goes through your personal lens.
Well, I think our personal lens are basically compromised because we cannot see what the actual world is. Think of it like the Matrix.
That's the first thing I thought of when you said it.
I'm not saying that he does not say that we're asleep in a computer world, but
it's philosophy stuff.
It's the same. It's in the ballpark. We are
it's a way to look at it. Yep.
What you see is not real.
Well, kind of. I mean, it's really true though. It's pretty drastic sometimes when you like if you think one thing and it wasn't, and you get all riled up inside, your emotions move, you find, oh, I was looking at that wrong. It's not even that,
The rules and values that we are raised on by our parents or family are one of the truths and beliefs that we originally follow from childhood. And we integrate what we've learned from childhood into our own belief system as part of our perception of the reality that we recognize. In other words, like a world-building game, all the data that we collect and perceive, we add it to that false reality that we're perceiving. Is all part of the structure, like a simulation, and we're just adding to that world, to the building blocks.
So this book, I presume it's about how to clean it up and get clear?
More like to if it basically says to recognize it, and then there are 4 agreements, 4 facts that you must accept so that you won't be affected by the negative influences of that fog, as if to help you cast aside the negativity that's burdening you so that you can be able to better cope with your life amid the fog.
Cool.
He also says that to have absolute belief in these values is called faith. The part of ourselves which casts doubt or hesitancy over actions is called the judge. And our feeling of guilt of having broken the very values that we have learned and accepted is called the victim. Now, the way I see it, I associate these two terms as our conscience. The judge and the victim, I consider that as our conscience. In other words, that if we feel judged or if we feel negatively affected by not going along by the norms that we have been raised on, we have an emotional reaction because of it. We feel guilt, we feel pride, or whatnot. But Ruiz labels it as the judge and the victim, as if they're two personalities, which I found interesting because it relates to the structure of birth as, not structure of birth, the structure of growth by Piaget.
All right, what's that?
Well, Piaget said that when we're from birth until adolescence, we are mostly exploring the world. We're more interested in exploring how the world looks like, how it affects us physically, that is. When we enter adolescence, we are more into ourselves. It's all about exploring our own personality. For that reason, with teenagers, it's a turbulent passage because we think we know the world when we're done with childhood, and now it's all about how we react. On the other hand, it's actually a struggle between us learning more about the world while also learning about ourselves at the same time. Those are two examples that Jean Piaget, and by the way, he was a Swiss psychologist. He studied child development. And again, it relates to Ruiz because we're still exploring the world as we grow. I don't think that we stop exploring. Even when we enter old age, we continue exploring this world. I don't think that there's a cap on how much knowledge you can acquire, on how much wisdom one can perceive. It's all within the experience.
And the constant appreciation of all the wonders, on the daily.
Oh, definitely. The sociologist Erickson, it parallels him as well. He created various stages of development. In our childhood, we go through the trust-mistrust stage, where we grow up determining what in life can we resort to and what should we stay away from, which is similar to what Piaget said about the child exploring the world.
Yeah, avoid the flame.
And as we grow from trust versus mistrust, we grow to autonomy and shame and doubt. When we explore how the world affects us, when we try to live it independently and at the same time have our reactions with right and wrong. Now, not what are absolute rights and wrongs, but the rights and wrongs of the value system that we were raised on. Eventually, the child grows into adult and they determine of the values that their parent and society has raised them on, and they form their own value system as well. And of course, there's also initiative versus guilt, in which when we plan the development and with judgment and we go forward on what we're going to do in that life. And it goes on, it goes forward on that. I'm not going to say all the 7 stages, but again, the reason why I'm bringing this up is that Ruiz's explanation amid the Toltec analogies parallels that of Piaget and Erickson, but he has his own terminology for it.
That's cool. So it's all familiar and it's all kind of simple frameworks for, I don't know what. Just those are 3 different people kind of sussed out the same thing and came up with a similar framework.
3 different people who developed their own interpretation of development and how to react with what the world offers, with what the world has for you. But 2 of them have done it on the basis of scientific research, and the other, it's not so much as a scientific book of research, it's more of a book that has tools. I'm not saying that I'm sure he has done his research, but he provides a different explanation of how to approach the world. Piaget and Erickson have studied growth and development in children and, of course, of adults to find a way to explain our stages in life
and all the cause and effect.
Ruiz, on the other hand, provides us his perspective, philosophical perspective of how the world appears, to explain why we feel certain ways and why do negative forces affect us in certain ways and how to cope with that. That's the benefit of this book, because it's a good book. I loved what I found in there. And let's get to the first agreement.
Okay.
So in the first agreement, he says the first thing you should do is to keep your word.
Be impeccable with your word.
He wrote, the word is not just a sound or written symbol. The word is a force. It is the power you have to express and communicate, to think, and thereby to create events in your life. The word is the most powerful tool you have as a human. It is a tool of magic, but like a sword with two edges, your word can create the most beautiful dream, or your word can destroy everything around you. Interestingly enough, he explains how the power of our influence, what we say and how we communicate to people, holds a potential of influence, and that can shift opinions, that can alter how one conducts themselves in life.
Yeah, times a million. Times, it can work en masse on a lot of people at once. The word.
Would you say that the way how we communicate to people, it's all within the communication of how that we should be careful of what we promise, what we claim, how our own beliefs can affect of how they see things?
Wow, it's deep, because on the front, on the face, it's like your word, your bond, you made an agreement, you're going to follow through, but underneath it is all the okay, you're not keeping your word, you're flapping your gums, you're saying a bunch of stupid stuff, and it just is more than your word is not good. It's more like, it's all just pollution. It's like audio pollution anyways.
Well, you say audio pollution.
Just, the opposite. Okay, I said I was going to do this. I did it, or I speak truth, and I'm not a giant riddle. I'm pretty plain to read. That if you're that character versus if you're like talking smack and not following through, and basically the hole on your face, if you're that person, is turning into like just a flap of like noise, and your word becomes diluted. Not the power isn't there.
That alone can even influence people on their world of trust, on how they see other people. They see people conducting themselves in a certain manner that is not agreeable, including how poorly they communicate. They can make the choice of either, well, I'm just going to be like them because they're acting like it and no one's calling them out on it, or I can do the opposite of those.
And you say claiming.
Yes.
Yeah, claiming's the worst, huh?
They say never say that person claimed, because you're casting doubt over what they say. But on the other hand, I don't know if what the person said is true or not until it's proven fact. To me,
it's a preview.
It's like a preview. It's a way to say, hey, they say this, but I'm not certain. And there's no harm in not being certain about things that you hear. Actually, it's healthy. There is a healthy amount of skepticism. It's just all about not being opinionated and just saying no one can be trusted. That's why it's always good to not believe everything that you're told immediately, but at the same time, don't be incredibly doubtful of everything you're told as well.
Yeah, you got it. It's a lot.
The author does connect the importance of keeping your word to impeccability. Now check this out. He describes the etymological structure of the word impeccable. That the word impeccable means without sin. Im means not. Pecca, as in peccato, which is sin, so without sin. It defines sin as anything that you do which goes against yourself. He clarifies that you do not have to be without sin, but instead that you own up to your own actions without judging or blaming yourself. His logic is that it begins with rejecting yourself, which is the biggest sin you can commit, and impeccability is the antithesis of self-rejection. That being without sin is the opposite of not accepting yourself. If you can see where he's going with this, he implies self-love, self-care, and in doing so, he means not to use your word against yourself, and instead to be impeccable with your word, a quid pro quo with yourself. Now, I see that he means that self-rejection is the most harmful thing you can do to your mental health. And obviously, he labels it as a sin, as it is a detriment, whether it is your soul or your conscience or your mental health or your well-being. I can understand what he means by, in that form, that A, do not reject yourself, accept yourself, because if you reject yourself, that is, in a way, a sin. Now, I don't believe he's meaning it religiously. That, again, he means sin as doing something that harms yourself, that does something that goes against yourself. To him, that's sin. So he wants you to be impeccable in that he doesn't want you to do anything that would hurt your own self, that would go against your own benefit. He wants you to take care of yourself. The word impeccable, people have often, me included, have associated it with perfect. Of course, if you look at it religiously, Christ once said, he who without sin cast the first stone, meaning none of us are perfect. That we should be without sin in the sense that we should live a life that is not detrimental to ourselves.
That's a really gooey area, right? And it's gray. So I guess maybe when you said it, I thought like to do that, you pretty much want to do it intuitively or you'll be clunky,
But that's the thing. You could be clunky and that
thinking about every move or just be good, be the light,
Be good to yourself. You basically like when you keep your word is to keep your word to yourself. That do not be the liar to yourself. Do not be the misleading personality to yourself. I would think that it's good to have a sense of reality. Know your limits. See if you can cross those limits for the better. And know what you should stay away from and why it's important that you shouldn't do these things to yourself. And I mean specifically to be hard on yourself, to basically have a lifestyle that is not good for your physical, emotional, or mental health. At the same time, he means that you should make a deal with yourself. Again, the quid pro quo. I rather much prefer Oscar Wilde's quip that there's no sin but stupidity. The things that you do wrong will eventually backfire on you. It falls right back on the word of the word sin. But I mean, we've all done silly things in our past. We've all done foolish mistakes. We've all done things that were mistakes. And in our wiser years, we look back and it has a little sting on us. You say, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I made that move. I should never have done that. We all have our errors of mistake.
Sin is a weird word. The sin, right? It's got the heaviness of like judgment and shame, when you...
Judgment and shame, but as Ruiz says, it's mainly on yourself. That he says that when it comes to sin, is whatever you're doing that's harming yourself. In contrast to the societal representation of sin, that you're harming the community, and that they care more about the moral standing of the community, more of your own well-being. That one way or another, that to commit a sin, and however way one interprets it, in the end, it is a detriment to yourself. Now, there have been people that would have used the word sin on people doing things that were not actually harmful, but it was against the interest of the collective. However, Ruiz does not talk about that because it's all about your survival and mitote. It's about how you can cope with this world. And again, the first thing you should do is take care of yourself. Don't do or say anything that can harm yourself, including being very judgmental on yourself.
Is that rejecting yourself?
Exactly. Yeah, that involves rejecting yourself.
Because you would treat somebody else, you advise them better, but you might be not do that for yourself. But
imagine if you were to pull out every single piece of homework that you've done from childhood to even now, and we take a look at the history of mistakes that you made. I mean, yeah, those are mistakes. Looking back, it looks easy to avoid it. But from childhood and as we grow, our mistakes are our lack of awareness of the actions that we're doing at the time. We don't really reflect on them.
It's another weird word, mistake, sin. It's not weird, it's just hard,
Well, I mean, mistake would be an error. And according to Ruiz, sin
less.
Oh no, that sounds less. But again, should we really be hard on ourselves to constantly judge ourselves as long as we live because of the previous mistakes.
But he puts in words in there, the sin thing.
Yes.
The psychology of it and the sussing it out, how to see it.
Yeah, he's using those words, but he's not connecting it to the religious sense. He does make historical references, but he doesn't at all, try to draw connections with scripture of any religion for that matter. He's sticking to, and like I said, he does it very well because, again, he talks about sin, but he's not talking about it in the Christian sense or in the monotheistic sense. He's talking about doing things that are harmful unto yourself and not how a community would view it.
So having a benchmark inside yourself and being like, where am I on it? Am I, with your every step, every breath, every move, every frisbee throw, is it for the good of all?
Will be, in his case, will be for the good of yourself at the time. He does mention about to conduct yourself well on others, to, not bring negativity onto others. And from that point, he ties in being true with yourself with the virtue of seeking the truth. And he does a good job tying it up with gossip on how it influences us negatively.
The second nugget is...
Oh, we're not yet
seeking the truth, you said?
Oh, no. It's in conclusion of being true to yourself. Okay. Because when you're keeping your word, you have to be true to yourself. And he also explains how it relates with how we deal with gossip. It relates to mitote, or the dream fog in our minds. He provides compelling examples and explanations on why it is important to reserve your word for the truth, such as saying only things that are with the intention of love and care. In other words, your actions with others and yourself must be genuine.
That's cool.
Not facetious. And now we are at the second agreement.
All right.
So the second agreement is to not take things personally. If you take something that someone says or does personally, you essentially agree with that slight. And it is by extension, a form of self-importance, which is a high level of selfishness.
And you're getting puppeted by somebody's stuff and unwittingly, right?
Exactly. Any offense made to you should not be perceived as about you, but rather whatever the offender is going through.
It's a bounce off.
And I agree with this because when it comes to your life, some moments or some experiences are in fact about you. However, here's where it gets interesting. Ruiz does say that it is not necessarily the statement or the gestures that gives offense, but instead that the statement or gesture has, as he wrote, touched old wounds. So whether someone is trying to insult you or they say something that you take offense, one way or another, it is triggering you. It is opening up an old wound. That something unpleasant from your past was triggered, and as a result, the pain is revisited. So do not take offense. Do not take it personally. By doing so, you would actually be fortifying the old wounds to desensitize. The crazy thing is indignation, the anger of being disrespected, the anger of being mistreated. He says it is not indignant or weak to overlook offenses.
It's energy efficient.
It's an exercise of strength.
Yeah.
And
skip a step.
To skip a step, and not only to demonstrate your dignity, but it also helps yourself overpower the traumas or the pain bodies, as Eckhart Tolle calls them.
The donkey kick, the knee-jerk reaction of, it made me think of...
The first reaction. Yeah, like when someone says something, even if they weren't trying to be offensive, and you get offended by that because it triggered an old memory, it opened an old wound, to not take offense to it actually helps you fortify against such triggers, because it helps you overpower the traumas that have held you back or kept you down. I like it best when he said that when you take things personally, you set yourself up to suffer for nothing.
Yeah.
Now take that for a minute, yeah.
The victim thing, huh?
You're feeling a victim, but you're feeling upset when there's not an attack happening.
That's creepy, spooky. You don't want that.
No,
and a ghost.
A specter.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's just some meddlesome ghost that's giving you issues. He makes a good point about that because there are people that will say things to push your buttons. There are people who want to get you upset. Now, you can say, well, that person's going through their own troubles, so they're projecting it on me. Now, here's where I have a disagreement with Ruiz. I do think, like I said, I don't think it's selfish to be offended by what someone says. I think we all have our own securities and insecurities. It'll be like saying that someone was playing a sport, they hit the ball, it goes over it goes beyond the perimeter and hits you in the face. That hurt. You tell the player, hey, that hurt. Now, is that selfish of you to say that? The same thing applies with words. I think that you have a right, and you shouldn't feel bad to express being offended or being hurt by what has been said, whether intentional or unintentional.
Maybe he's saying don't call a $20 problem a $2,000 problem.
And that's where I wanted to bring it around exactly. That
don't even call it a problem, right? It's a temporary situation.
That the healthiest thing you can do, as hard as it may be, because you're trying to overlook indignation, is when that happens to you, the best thing you can do is to take a moment and not make a huge thing about it. Now, of course, I think there are levels of offenses, though.
Yeah, you can walk away.
You can walk away. You can try to find a solution. Of course, there's going to be a moment of pain, and you're not going to like it.
You can make yourself laugh.
You can make yourself laugh, but after you're done getting through whatever triggered, to identify what the trigger was and try to get past it. Sometimes in the moments of pain, we're not interested in getting and seeing that trigger. We're not interested in knowing what's upsetting us. We just feel in the moment of anger.
It can come on quick.
It can come on quick.
And you want to be able to turn it off quick, but that's the trick, right?
The trick is turning it off. The trick is surmounting it. He explains how it relates to mitote, and he also explains the tricks to turning it off. But I'll leave that to you guys who are listening if you want to check it out. It is, I think, the third agreement would be the fourth chapter, because the first chapter, he explains mitote and all that.
All right.
So, which brings us to the third agreement. Third agreement, do not make assumptions. Ruiz wrote that the problem in making assumptions is that we believe that they are the truth, the assumptions, that we feel that they are real. The cycle is, as Ruiz puts it, that we make an assumption, it becomes a misunderstanding, we take it personally, cue the drama. Definitely never believe in assumptions. There are people who will believe assumptions, especially assumptions from people whom they trust. When they hear information from people whom they trust, so they make the assumptions on the basis of faith, not considering perhaps that person does not have all the information. But there have been people, me included, I've made the mistake of believing assumption or making assumptions and sticking to them, that we make an assumptions and then we bring them out in the world of gossip, and then they become a bigger mess because there's a lack of communication.
And if you double deck that with the other thing, what we was just talking about with the getting puppeted emotionally by people, if you double deck it with that and you exist in those states for too long, too many days, too many weeks, then your balance is all like your chemistry and your good vibe versus resting vibe is just off, and you putting time into being in that state probably perpetuates that state, huh?
It definitely does. It can perpetuate that state. Because with assumptions, we are attracted to the feel of certainty. Kind of like when someone gives you a deal for something you want to buy, you think it's a good deal because you haven't checked out the other deals.
Or it says it lasts forever on it, and you just go, oh, maybe this one will last.
Yeah, you go with your gut, you make a leap of faith. But it's dangerous to make a leap of faith with an assumption.
Yeah, yep.
We love the feeling of certainty is alluring, especially when we think, yeah, I got this. This is definitely what it's got to be. But You'll be surprised or often disappointed when you find out that the assumption that you stuck to, that you didn't bother to check, turned out to be not only false, but a massive detriment on your part. High expectations. But even going along, whether you're taking things personally or you're following an assumption without checking everything else, you are not taking care of yourself. You're not being true to yourself in the end. You are basically going along with the very falsehoods that the fog provides. And I love this one sentence that he wrote in the book.
Yeah, let's hear it.
He wrote, "Gossiping is the way we communicate with each other in the dream of hell, and we transfer poison to one another." The funny thing is that
he's very poetic.
He's really poetic. He does a great job explaining his points and laying out his examples. Fine, he does a great job. What he said reminds me of Dante's 8th circle of hell in the Inferno, where thieves are bitten by snakes and in which they themselves become snakes. Now, of course, we're talking about liars, not thieves. But then again, if you see the movie The Kite Runner, the father tells his son, there's only one sin, and that sin is stealing. When you lie to someone, you are stealing their right from the truth. But liars or gossipers have had that reputation to be called snakes, vipers, vessels of poison, which, does a huge disservice, gives a bad representation to actual snakes. I feel bad for snakes there are people who give snakes a bad name.
Yeah.
Because snakes, I don't think there's any snake that's willfully malicious, except maybe cottonmouths, or just very territorial.
They get that face. They have
that, and of course, they carry poison, for defense mechanism for hunting, but they don't walk around looking for people to bite.
Yeah.
And I'm digressing again.
That's cool.
But why they may gossip is because, like snakes, they send out their poison out of fear, although unlike snakes, it is a foolish fear. It is a fear to seek clarity, that they gossip because they are afraid to seek clarification. I mean, is it fear or just plain laziness, incompetence? They don't seek clarity because they don't bother to seek it. Or that the assumption is a good story, so they report an assumption. Like Mark Twain said, a lie has made it around the world just as soon as the truth gets out.
So more audio pollution.
Audio pollution, yet more of just unnecessary claims and statements that just ruin your vibe.
Yeah, and pollute the airways. Gets in your ear hole.
That they're scared of clarification, but then again, I think they can be scared. There are people who just don't want the real truth. They want to stick with the assumption because it's the sweet lie and not the bitter truth. But again, there are people who they get an assumption, they make an assumption, and they are attracted to that, and they just don't want to bother to see if it's true.
He's saying don't be that way, right? He's saying don't be that guy.
What do you think is what would you see is the greater likelihood that people make the mistake of sticking to assumptions?
Well, there it is, a mistake, huh? It's if it's a bunch of tools for learning and guiding, I just say take some of the harshness away from it and be like, okay, everybody can fall down, got to get back up, don't talk no smack with everybody else, right?
Yeah.
But don't talk smack.
Don't talk smack.
Don't be the snake.
They say it's bad enough that you hear a lie, but the worst is to repeat that lie to someone else. And I say lie because if you hear something from someone else, would it kill you to verify it? And now, of course, you would say, is it my business to verify it? Well, if it's not your business to verify it, then it shouldn't be your business to propagate it at the same time, to spread it around. Be
cool, right? Take a beat.
Be cool, take a beat. But there's a combination. I mean, it's just not one main reason. There are those who fear the truth, and then there are just those who are too lazy to seek it. And they're just...
They send out a shower of words to make a cloud for them and everybody else to just get wafted in.
Well, remember what I said, that we are a collective of perceptions at the beginning of the book. That we're just a collective dream. And those people who want you to play by their perceptions for their own gain is pretty much a chink in that chain of dreams.
Or maybe not even for their own gain. Maybe just they want to throw confetti in the air just because they're a tornado of chaos.
They would have a motivation to be a tornado of chaos, would they?
So there's people so someone's working on themselves, and over here is a tornado that isn't, and everything in between, it's all happening at once. And so this book is kind of some guidelines and perspectives, right? To
it's a guidelines of perspectives.
Right your ship and see it in another way, the universal kind of truth stuff.
It would be irresponsible that decisions that you make, if they lead to the demise of others, that wouldn't be well in the right. Then they're like to not let our perceptions become a detriment to others.
Yeah, I guess if you're, pushing big buttons up in like a high level military political sphere, then it's sometimes cut and dry. But for Joe Schmo and maybe me and you, it's a little more flowy, and it's a little easier just to do that, and be cut and dried about, it feels good, it's good. And
that's true.
Compared to you got to make decisions that will affect other people if you're like in charge of a whole bunch of people, if you're like speaking for, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, definitely.
It's easier when it's just you or you and your group, but when you're like...
what you say reminds me about how our actions affect each other. It reminds me of a book called Winesburg, Ohio. It was a modern book. It was written by, I think his name is Sherwood Anderson.
All right.
And here's the deal. It's basically a book about the people in this town, Winesburg. And they're just basically short stories about the various residents of that town. And there is a main character who appears in multiple stories. In the end, I won't tell you in the end, but the beginning of the book talks about an elderly man who writes a book of the grotesque. And I believe it is basically him writing about different personalities that make up something that it doesn't latch on to the standards or expectations of society. The book of the grotesque, that he creates a book that would not be initially appealing to read, or at least to the man who wrote it, to things that are...
What kind of grotesque?
Well, that's the thing. It doesn't go into detail about that.
Oh, okay.
But the thing is that what is exactly what is grotesque? My idea is that the whole book seemingly appears that the stories are unrelated, that it takes place in the town, but that there's no underlying theme. Kind of like Elgar's Enigma variations, that truly that there's no theme. On the other hand, there have been attempts to explain the theme. The way I see it, every story is related to the other based on the actions of each of the characters, kind of like falling dominoes, and the falling dominoes reveal the true nature of the people in that town. And I think that was the book of the grotesque, all those personalities combined. So if we were to take a look at this world and we have our perceptions projected onto each other, if someone were to see various televisions of what everyone sees, deals with, believes, feels, collection of actions and perceptions,
omniscience,
it looks like a massive mess. But if you look at every single piece, there is an individual and perhaps innocent perspective.
It's a giant explosion, and it's roiling.
It's just a melting pot.
Yeah, real time.
Now, there's one more thing about the third agreement, is that the assumption over the truth, as it fits the emotional projection or image that we see in that fog, which clouds us from reality, from the truth, it all falls inside the same category. Now, Ruiz provides an example as to how you can look through the fog, and therefore look past what a false yet amusing story says. He provides a step on how to avoid making assumptions. He provides the rationale for checking for clarity.
He's got a tick list, huh?
He does. He provides very good examples which counters excuses for making assumptions. If you want to know how to and why you should do it, then I recommend you read the 4th chapter, which leads us to the fourth and final agreement.
Cool.
Always do your best. And I think that, I'm not going to say the quote, but it kind of reminds me of that quote that Sean Connery said in The Rock, about doing your best. Losers give their best. Winners. I'm not going to say the end, but one of the most confident quotes I ever heard. But
I felt like a Boy Scouts kind of vibe, be
definitely.
More,
especially how Connery said it in The Rock.
Yeah, that was like So do your best, if you know that it's not hot or your effort is watered down, that everybody else is going to know that. It's so you don't be that.
Well, it goes in full circle because, just as you said, you have to give it what you can. But going your best does coincide with being true to your word.
And the balance of life,
Imagine the person who's trying to get that thing done and they're tired or they're frustrated, so they give into that. They give up. And did they truly give their best? Can they tell themselves, I did everything I could?
You got to round those corners. You got to sand them off and be like, that's life. You got to round off the hard edges that you wish you didn't have, right? Yeah. When it comes to balance and doing the right thing and living well.
Well, I think the people don't see that because they are too fixated on a one moment scenario of saying, well, I tried and it didn't work. Well, did you try again? Did you do it incrementally? I understand that everyone has their own challenges, and it's easy to tell them, try again, to make a plan. But on the other hand, it doesn't hurt to go back to what you try to work on. It doesn't hurt to try again to fix whatever issues you have, whether it be eating habits or...
He said do your best.
Oh, that's the 4th agreement. Always do your best.
Always do your best.
And of course, he explains how it ties in. But of course...
Your best.
Your best, your own best. Because remember, he's talking about the individual going through.
That's good.
And it's all about being true to your word and trusting that you will fulfill that word that you made to yourself.
I like it.
There is no shame in not succeeding the first time. It's not failure. Failure is when you just up and quit and don't want to revisit it because you don't believe it's possible when it is possible.
Yeah, because life is a bumpy ride.
Now,
right?
It's a bumpy ride, and there's no harm in giving it a rest to say, I'm just going to stop this for a second and get some time to think about it. Your life is your own pacing. Your time is how you manage it. You can put off something for 3 months because you're frustrated with it and you have to concentrate on other matters. You come back to it and try again. You never quit. And the way I see it, giving it your best is trying to see it through it.
And what's best for you will help you give what's, your best. If you do think, the big picture, do what's best for you.
Well, that's a good point, because what if the thing that you're trying to work on is harming you more than helping you? Or maybe the approach you're taking is not what's best for you.
Yeah, getting like all cornered up and fixated efforts on like too much of a focus over here to get the kaleidoscope going again.
When one looks into the kaleidoscope, the thing about the kaleidoscope is that it provides different patterns and different ways to see it.
And everybody's got their own way to juggle.
As long as you know that the difference between the kaleidoscope and mitote is that you can put the kaleidoscope away. With mitote, according to Ruiz, it's there in your waking hours.
The perpetual fog.
And that the reality is behind that fog. Almost reminds me of Plato's cave.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
The guy's in the cave, he has the fire.
Shadows.
The shadows are what he thinks is reality, because he's never bothered to turn around and check out the cave.
They were chained, and they couldn't see it, right?
Chained by their necks and ankles inside a cave. So that's why they
You
don't
see the
turn around.
shadows of the real world on the cave wall, but people outside the cave are like, oh, I see that I'm making the shadow and y'all don't see what I see.
In summary,
Okay.
first agreement, keep your word. Be true to yourself. Do not be self-rejecting, self-loathing. Don't be too hard on yourself.
Self-rejecting, that's cool.
Second agreement, don't take things personally, meaning that whether someone is saying something intentionally or unintentionally to hurt you, that hurts you, don't take whatever they say or do personally.
Or even the world pressing on you.
Or even the world pressing on you. It just is all on how your mind perceives it. And it's the perception of the world attached to your memory of the past that can unlock whatever has bothered you that makes you feel attacked and insecure about it.
Try to skip that vibe of attacked and insecure, huh? You acknowledge it and skip it. Cool.
Get past it. Easier said than done, but third, avoid assumptions. You hear an assumption or you make an assumption, don't stick to it as fact until you have clarity. Do not just make leaps because it'll work against you. It'll backfire.
Foolhardy, right?
It's foolhardy.
Confident and all that you're in the fog. And final one, always do your best. And it goes full circle with keeping true to your word, that if you haven't fully tried, then you're not doing yourself any favors. So always do your best. And your best goes back to don't reject yourself.
Yeah, don't fall into self-rejection.
Being too hard on yourself. So your best, whatever measure that is.
Whatever measure that is truly. Because in the end, if you don't live up to if you don't follow that full measure, never mind the fog. These are great points for whatever notions we have of the world, that you should treat yourself better. You should think what is best for your health, what is best for your sanity. You should always never let things get you angry. You might feel angry, but you should never let them be the ultimate notion in your mind.
And don't abide in that state for too long, because if you hang out there and you get all used to it, then you got the poo vibe going.
Yep, and before you know it, you'll have a grudge. You'll be angry about something, and your mood will be negative, and people will never know why, and perhaps you'll never know why, because you're angry about something and you never identified it, confronted it, and set it apart. The third one, always check for verification and clarification. Do not ever, stick to assumptions because it's the same thing as following falsehoods. And
assuming, for instance, that you got to be all, anxious about anything, and that kind of thing.
And deep down, you don't have all the facts. So again, it revolves back with self-care. And in the end, always do your best and never take it personally. Try and try again, as they say, and don't let your concern of not succeeding overcome you. That life is just a journey, and it's mainly on how well we've lived on that journey. That every challenge that we have is like a pet project that we have in our own, whether it's workplace or passion projects.
All that stuff sounds great, It sounds really great.
Whether you're religious or not, whether you're spiritual or not, this is a good book to check out, because he doesn't write like pushing spirituality on you. Yes, he does mention the fog, but it's a gift. It's a gift.
The book is a gift.
It's a gift of wisdom. It's a good book. Now, like any religious books, whether it is the New Testament, whether it is learning about the Eightfold Path or the Tao Te Ching or whatnot, there's wisdom in any scripture that you might find. The idea is not to be 100% about it.
And this guy went deep when he wrote this book.
The points he makes, not just that certainly, but not just
poetic word flow is like
poetic word flow. He explains it very well, as if a teacher is explaining to you the way how things work.
You were ready to hear it.
I thank Nate and Julie for letting me check out that book. Thank you so much, Nate and Julie.
Cool.
But here we are, the social contrast. Again, next time something's bugging you out there in the world, just check out what we talked about. Check out the book, in fact.
Oh, glad to be here.
Glad to be here, too. Have a great day, everybody.